Two cops mocked him from the defense table, but when he revealed he was the director of Homeland Security, the entire courtroom froze. The walls in courtroom 3B of the Lowndes County Courthouse were stained yellow near the ceiling vents. The floor creaked in all the wrong places, and the air conditioning wheezed louder than it cooled. It was the kind of place where nothing much changed. Not the chairs, not the people, and definitely not the assumptions. At 9:02 a.m., Leonard Braxton walked in. Dark grey suit, leather folder in hand. Nothing flashy. He didn't scan the room like someone trying to get a read. He already knew what he'd find. Two cops at the defense table. White, broad-shouldered, looking bored. The one on the left leaned back and whispered something, prompting the other to snort and smirk like a kid in detention. Leonard didn't flinch. He'd seen worse in rooms far colder than this, places where power didn't wear uniforms. It wore masks. "Mr. Braxton!" the clerk called, gesturing toward the witness stand. He stepped forward quietly, every movement measured. He wasn't in a rush. He knew time was on his side. As he passed the defense table, he caught a glance from Officer Brett Kinley. Mid-40s, receding buzz cut, chewing gum like a teenager. Kinley locked eyes for a second too long, then leaned toward his partner. "Probably another race card witness," he muttered, just loud enough. "They bring one of these guys out every time we do our damn jobs." His partner, Officer Troy Danvers, chuckled under his breath. "Bet he's a professor. They all want to be professors." Leonard heard it. So did the bailiff, who said nothing. The judge, a man with permanent bags under his eyes, tapped his pen like he was waiting for lunch. Leonard took the stand. "Please state your name for the record," the prosecutor asked. "Leonard Franklin Braxton." "And your occupation, Mr. Braxton?" "I work in government." That was all he said. No title, no extra explanation. The prosecutor didn't press. They had a strategy. Let the testimony speak before the man's resume did. Kinley leaned in again, speaking behind his hand. "Bet he's some state-level diversity guy." Danvers chuckled again, then yawned. Leonard sat calmly, his posture straighter than the cheap backrest behind him. His eyes didn't roam. He wasn't interested in the courtroom murals or the worn flags. He was watching the two men who thought they were watching him. The prosecutor began with soft questions, details about the stop, what Leonard had reviewed, why he was asked to testify. It all felt basic, like preheating an oven. The real heat hadn't started yet. From the gallery, a woman in a light blue blouse watched him intently. Short braids, maybe mid-30s. She clutched a manila folder so tight the edges had curled. Beside her sat a young man, early 20s, a scar running down his cheekbone like an old memory. He didn't blink once while Leonard spoke. Danvers whispered, "Look at his shoes, though. Fancy. Probably one of those DC guys trying to make a point." Kinley laughed under his breath. "Yeah. Watch him cry about systemic trauma or some crap." Leonard heard that too. He didn't blink. He just turned a page in his notes, slow, deliberate. Every breath he took sounded calm, controlled. The judge finally looked up. "Please stick to facts, Mr. Braxton. No opinions." Leonard met his eyes and gave a small nod. "Facts are all I brought, Your Honor. But even then, not a single person in the room knew who they were dealing with. The officers hadn't Googled the witness list. The defense lawyer hadn't done a proper background check. And no one, not even the judge, had been informed of what was really happening here. Because Leonard Braxton didn't want anyone to know. Not yet. He wasn't here to prove his title. He was here to prove something else entirely. But they didn't realize who they were laughing at. To understand why Leonard Braxton kept quiet, you'd have to go back about 30 years, to a kitchen table in Fort Smith, Arkansas. A young Leonard sat across from his father, a welder with calloused hands and a habit of waking up before the sun. His dad didn't talk much, but that morning he said something Leonard never forgot. "People won't see your title, son. They'll see what they expect to see. Let that be your advantage." Leonard had been living that lesson ever since. He didn't come from money, but he came from order, discipline, respect that had to be earned 3 times over. He put himself through college at the University of Tulsa. Criminal justice, minor in foreign policy. No frat parties, no noise. Just books, gym workouts at 6 a.m., and overnight shifts at the university library. He applied to a little-known program in D.C. right after graduation, a national counter-terrorism fellowship that rarely accepted candidates from outside Ivy League schools. He made it on the second try. Nobody in the room clapped when he walked in on the first day, but by the end of that year, nobody questioned why he'd stayed. Leonard didn't climb. He rose. No favors, no scandals, no stories in the press. Just clean work, smart decisions, and a reputation for remembering everything. Badge numbers, license plates, birthdays of colleagues who forgot his. He didn't talk about politics or race or the bigger picture. He just read people better than most analysts read classified memos. By 42, he was directing operations in counterintelligence. By 50, he was sitting in situation room meetings without ever making headlines. The president's call came quietly, an appointment to lead Homeland Security. Leonard accepted with one condition. No press conference, just a line in a memo buried between budget announcements. He didn't need the world to know. He needed the work to get done. That's what made this hearing so personal. Leonard wasn't here as the director. He wasn't even here as a federal official. He was here because the case landed on his desk in a stack of reports, one file out of hundreds. But what caught his attention wasn't just the brutality, it was the familiarity. The victim, Darius Miles, had served overseas. Leonard had reviewed Darius's security file once when he applied for a government clearance. The kid was clean, disciplined, strong-minded. And now, thanks to 2 smug officers in southern Georgia, that same kid had a metal plate in his jaw and permanent nerve damage in his left hand. They called it excessive force. Leonard called it something else. He looked at Darius's photo on the last page of the report and said out loud, "No, not this one." He asked his staff for the full case file. And when he saw the names, Brett Kinley and Troy Danvers, it felt like reading bad fiction. Same officers, same pattern, excessive stops, missing footage, complaints that went nowhere. But it was what they didn't bother to hide that made Leonard shake his head. Sloppy paperwork, false reports, the arrogance of thinking nobody would ever look deeper. So he made a call. Not to DC, to the local court clerk. "I'll testify," he said. "No need to mention who I am." "Sir, respectfully, why not?" "Because the truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs a place to stand." He booked a modest room at a motel outside town. Drove himself. Wore a suit that didn't scream federal anything. And when he walked into the courtroom that morning, he wasn't carrying the weight of his title. He was carrying the memory of every time someone like Kinley or Danvers smirked their way past accountability. He didn't come to teach them a lesson. He came to hold up a mirror. But this wasn't just a hearing anymore. This was personal. Brett Kinley and Troy Danvers weren't rookies. They weren't dirty cops in the traditional sense either. No secret drug deals, no mob ties, no backdoor bribes. Just 2 officers who believed the badge gave them immunity. They'd been partners for nearly 9 years in Valdosta. Small city, big egos. Brett liked to call it real police work, as if running stop signs and checking tags built the backbone of America. Troy played backup, quieter, but only when he wasn't drinking. Together they built a record full of what the department called proactive policing. It sounded nice in memos. It read like hell in complaints. The trouble started, or maybe just boiled over, with a traffic stop on Old Bemis Road. Darius Miles was driving back from night classes. His tail light was cracked. That's all they needed. The dashcam footage started late. It always did when these 2 were involved. What it did show was Darius standing outside his car, hands visible, calm, asking why he was being searched. "Probable cause?" Brett said, voice casual. "For what?" Darius asked. "You tell me," Troy chimed in. The rest of the footage cut in and out. What it didn't catch, hospital records filled in, dislocated shoulder, fractured jaw, a torn ligament in his knee, and a boot mark on his back. The department filed it away as a resistant suspect incident. Another line in a database. Darius filed a complaint. No response. He filed another. This one made it to someone with just enough pull to push it on to the desk of an assistant DA. That assistant DA reached out to federal observers. One of them flagged it and passed it up the chain, and that's how it ended up in Leonard Braxton's hands. But Kinley and Danvers didn't know any of that. They thought they were dealing with a basic review hearing. They thought the worst they'd get was a 6-month desk assignment and mandatory sensitivity training. Their lawyer, Benjamin Royce, had an old-school courtroom presence, part Southern charm, part arrogance wrapped in a navy pinstripe. He walked around like he'd already won. "Simple misunderstanding," he told the press outside. "My clients are committed to serving their community. We'll clear this up." Inside the courtroom, he barely looked at the prosecution's witnesses. He knew the game. Discredit, distract, delay. That had always worked. And so far, the judge seemed cooperative enough. Tired eyes, short on patience, easily bored. Royce knew the type. What he hadn't planned for was Leonard. When Leonard took the stand, Royce squinted like he was trying to place him. Maybe he'd seen him in a DC report once. Maybe he hadn't. Either way, the name didn't ring a bell. And that's what gave Leonard the upper hand. See, Kinley and Danvers had done this dance before. Testify. Deny. Watch the case fizzle. Maybe shake hands with the judge outside afterward. They had confidence, not built on innocence, but on habit. But this time, things were already slipping. The prosecution had been tighter than usual. Every question had a purpose. Every pause hit a nerve. And now Leonard was speaking with the kind of calm that made people nervous. Danvers whispered to Royce. "This guy keeps looking at us." Royce leaned over. "Ignore him. He's nobody." But even Royce was starting to notice something different. Leonard's phrasing, his control, the way he didn't flinch when they tried to cut him off. The courtroom had started to shift. The woman in the gallery with the manila folder leaned forward. Darius Miles' mother. Her eyes didn't leave Leonard for a second. Next to her, Darius sat in silence, mouth pressed shut. He hadn't spoken to the media, hadn't posted anything online. He just waited. Let the process talk. The court was about to learn that Leonard Braxton wasn't another talking head brought in for a soundbite. He was the man who signed off on security briefings the Attorney General had to read every morning. But they hadn't counted on the witness knowing every move they'd made. Leonard took a sip of water. Not because he was nervous, because he was preparing. The courtroom had grown quieter, like the air had shifted, and everyone could feel it without knowing why. The prosecutor stepped aside. "Mr. Braxton, could you please walk us through what you reviewed prior to your testimony?" Leonard nodded once. No hesitation. "I reviewed dashcam footage, audio dispatch records, internal patrol logs, incident reports, and an internal affairs investigation summary that was never forwarded to the Civilian Complaint Board." Royce leaned forward. "Excuse me, Your Honor, we were not made aware of an internal summary." The judge waved him off. "He's a witness, Mr. Royce. Let him speak." Leonard continued, flipping a page in his notes. "Officer Kinley reported that the suspect, Mr. Miles, refused to exit the vehicle. But radio logs show Kinley calling in a traffic stop after Mr. Miles was already out of the vehicle. That's timestamped at 19:42:09. The discrepancy is 26 seconds, unaccounted for on the dash cam." Kinley shifted in his seat. "I also reviewed the body cam footage. Officer Danvers' device powered down mid-interaction. Battery was fully charged at the start of the shift per standard check-in protocol. His own patrol log confirms that." Royce rose again. "Objection. Mr. Braxton is speculating about the body cam failure." Leonard looked directly at Royce, calm as ever. "Not speculation, sir. It's in the maintenance report filed 3 days later. I brought a copy." He slid a stapled packet across the witness stand. A ripple moved through the room. This wasn't a man guessing. This was a man who had spent years decoding lies that looked far cleaner than this. Leonard adjusted his seat, looked directly at the judge. I also reviewed GPS logs from the patrol unit. The car made an unscheduled stop 6 minutes after the incident. An empty lot off Clay Street. No report filed, no call made, no check-in. Danvers blinked rapidly. Royce scribbled something and passed it to his clients. Kinley didn't read it. He just clenched his jaw and looked at the floor. Leonard wasn't rushing. Every sentence was its own paragraph. Every word had weight. When Officer Kinley returned to the precinct that night, he submitted a use-of-force report. It was signed by his supervising officer without a follow-up interview. That supervisor, by the way, has 2 prior infractions for signing off on reports involving Officer Kinley without proper review. Those documents are included in the Federal Oversight Database under Article 7 compliance. I have copies. Royce was done objecting. He sat frozen, his pen dangling between 2 fingers. Leonard took another breath. I've reviewed nearly 900 use-of-force cases in the last 2 years. Statistically, less than 1% show the kind of cluster pattern I found between Officers Kinley and Danvers. Same racial profile of victims. Same inconsistencies in footage. Same lapses in documentation. That's not bad luck. That's a pattern. Gasps weren't allowed in courtrooms, but they happened anyway. Even the judge had stopped tapping his pen. From the gallery, Darius tilted his head slightly, like he was finally allowing himself to believe this might not be another dead-end hearing. His mother's hand gripped the folder tighter, knuckles pale. Leonard turned to the prosecution. Would you like me to proceed to the names of the other victims? The prosecutor gave a small nod. Please. Leonard read 5 names, each with a timestamp, each backed by records. Each one had filed a complaint that went nowhere, and 2 of them had moved out of state. 1 had died by suicide last year. That last name hit differently. No one in the courtroom could sit still after that. Even the judge leaned forward, chin in hand, eyes narrowed. Leonard closed his folder. No further details unless the court requests them, he said. Voice steady. Silence. Danvers muttered something. Kinley didn't say a word. Leonard sat back in the chair. Not slouched, not smug, just still. The courtroom had changed. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't needed to, but the storm hadn't even started yet. Royce finally stood. His face looked thinner now, color drained, his usual swagger gone. Mr. Braxton, he began, you've made strong assertions. May I ask, under whose authority were you reviewing these materials? Leonard didn't blink. Mine. And that authority is... Royce asked, trying to reclaim ground. Leonard didn't raise his voice. He didn't even lean forward. He just spoke with the kind of calm that made silence feel heavier. I'm the director of Homeland Security. The words didn't hit like a movie twist. They hit like a quiet realization. Slow, steady, irreversible. One juror raised their eyebrows. Another straightened in their seat. The gallery went still. You could hear the creak of a bench under someone shifting nervously. Royce laughed once, weakly. I'm sorry, I thought you said... I did, Leonard replied. I oversee federal response to domestic threats, including the conduct of law enforcement departments receiving federal funds. Valdosta PD is one of them. He reached into his folder again, pulled out a single sheet. This is a notification of a pending federal inquiry into patterns of abuse in this department. Signed this morning. Effective immediately. Royce stammered. You're saying this courtroom was... Leonard cut in, not unkindly. Observed? Yes. The investigation began 3 weeks ago. I wasn't just a witness. I was evaluating credibility. Yours, your clients, the department's. Danvers leaned forward suddenly. Wait. Hold up. This wasn't even a real hearing. Leonard turned his head slightly. No, Mr. Danvers. This is very real. Your actions had real consequences. And the system you thought would cover for you? It just ran out of excuses. Kinley finally spoke, voice low. You set us up. No, Leonard said, sharp this time. You set yourselves up the moment you started treating people like they were disposable. The judge cleared his throat. Is this confirmed, Mr. Braxton? Leonard slid another envelope to the bailiff. Signed by the Attorney General. You'll find a list of DOJ observers present in this courtroom today. That's when 2 people in the gallery stood. No suits, no ties, just calm eyes and ID badges they hadn't shown until now. Royce turned pale. He stepped back from the defense table. This is outrageous. This was a closed proceeding. Leonard kept his eyes on him. It's only closed if no one opens the door. Today, we did. No one spoke after that. Not the judge, not the jurors. The 2 officers sat in disbelief, realizing the room they thought they controlled was never theirs to begin with. From the back, Darius rose to his feet. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Leonard stood too. He adjusted his jacket, gathered his folder, and nodded once toward the gallery. Then, before stepping off the stand, he spoke one last time. For those watching, and those listening, every badge carries weight, and every abuse of that badge carries a cost. That cost will be paid. If not today, then tomorrow, but it will be paid. Then he stepped down. A pause hung in the air, too long to ignore. The judge finally called for a recess, but the word came out stiff, like it didn't know where to land. Outside the courthouse, news vans were already pulling up. Someone had leaked the name Leonard Braxton 30 minutes earlier. It didn't matter anymore. His face would be on the evening news before he reached the parking lot. He didn't flinch. The courtroom door shut behind him. He walked past reporters, past onlookers, past chaos. He didn't need applause. He didn't want it. But Leonard wasn't there for revenge. He was there for justice. Leonard didn't go back to Washington right away. He stayed one more night at the small motel near the edge of town. Same room, no upgrades. He didn't like commotion, and he definitely didn't need to celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. The next morning, just before sunrise, he sat outside with a black coffee and a notepad, scribbling thoughts that might never get shared. Not every win felt like one. The media was already turning the story into a headline. Homeland Security Director exposes corrupt cops in Georgia courtroom. They missed the point. It was never about a headline. He didn't need people to remember him. He needed people to think, to question, to start looking closer. Across town at a diner near the courthouse, Darius Miles sat in a booth with his mother. For the first time in months, he wasn't scanning the door every 5 seconds. He still felt pain in his shoulder, still felt the pull in his jaw when he tried to smile. But something had shifted. I didn't think anyone was going to show up for me, he said. His mother squeezed his hand. Someone did. Leonard didn't call them afterward. Didn't send a follow-up. He figured they needed their own peace. Sometimes the best way to protect someone was to walk away once the fight was over. Back in D.C., when Leonard returned to his office, his assistant had a stack of folders waiting for him. New cases, new reports. But right at the top, someone had slipped in a photo from the courtroom. It showed Leonard standing at the witness box, eyes steady, mouth mid-sentence. There was a note paper-clipped to the top. Some rooms need you to speak louder than the microphone. He smiled, just slightly. Leonard knew how the system worked. He knew it wouldn't crumble from one hearing. But maybe, just maybe, it cracked a little that day. Maybe one officer in one department would think twice before crossing the line. Maybe a young man watching from a distance would believe justice wasn't just a word. He didn't preach. He never had. But his presence said what needed saying. You never really know who you're looking at. And if you treat someone like they don't matter, be prepared when they remind you that they do, because power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it sits quietly in the back of a courtroom, listening, waiting, watching. And when the time is right, it speaks, not to intimidate, not to humiliate, but to remind people that truth has a memory. Some people mock what they don't understand. Some people laugh because they're scared and don't know it yet. But Leonard Braxton? He was the man who walked into a courtroom, let them write their own downfall, and didn't say who he was until they had already buried themselves in their lies. He wasn't the kind of man who needed a stage. He just needed a seat at the table. And he made sure others got theirs, too. If you've stayed with this story until now, ask yourself this. How many people have you judged before knowing the full picture? How many Leonards have walked past you, quietly watching? Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones who say the least, until it matters most. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories like this. Stories that remind us what you see isn't always what you get.